Time travel is the stuff that dreams are made of. Or at least if you watched it in movies in the last 20, 30 years, you would know it's the stuff that creativity is made of. If you had a superpower of traveling back in time, would you? Well, we're going to read a story today called A Sound of Thunder, which is a perfect follow up to the story we just finished called The Most Dangerous Game. And if you missed that, click the video and go watch it or hit the link in the show notes. It'll take you right over to our channel so that you can find the link there and go watch that short story reading and analysis. But for us, we're going to be talking about A Sound of Thunder where we are traveling back in time to go hunting. Now, there are some rules that we have to follow in A Sound of Thunder, and we will obviously get those rules so that we can understand how they play out. But if you know, like I know, anytime you get rules, they are going to be broken, right? Okay, so we've seen the movies such as Harry Potter, Prisoner of Azkaban, where Hermione does the time traveling. I'm old school. I grew up in the 80s, so I saw Back to the Future, one, two, three. I don't think there was a fourth. I think the Adam Project was time traveling as well. And so time traveling is just one of those paradoxes, the word that we just learned in Most Dangerous Game, but paradoxes that that we have to suspend our belief, right? Because this is what we do as readers. We have to suspend our belief and honestly like believe that that's true and that's possible. Maybe one day it will be, but not right now. But in A Sound of Thunder, it's more than true. It's actually a sport. And we are about to dive on in. So, again, inside the description, you will have a link directly to what we're reading. I will have it up on the screen. I may disappear. We don't know how the Zoom thing works. I try to have it where I'm like green screened over it, but sometimes it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Okay. um it starts off working and then it just like stops working. Okay. So A Sound of Thunder, again by Ray Bradbury. This was published in 1952. Um, and as we talked about a little bit with the last story, these short stories, these books that we read, they are timestamps because they are the author's thoughts processed through their words, right? And so in 1952, we had just completed World War II with, Hitler, the Nazis. All Germans weren't Nazis, but all Nazis were German, I think. Um, so we just went through a really terrible Holocaust, um, where many people were killed, but especially the Jewish people. So that was happening. And then at the brink of, in the 50s, in the 1950s, we were also entering this time where there was really the start of the Cold War. So we were at this war with Russia or the USSR at the time. And it wasn't like an actual war, meaning, like thankfully we were far enough away that it wasn't what it could have been. But there were fears in our own country, fears of communism, fears of other things happening in our country. And so you know, it was a kind of tumultuous time going on in the world, but also here at home. Like the 50s weren't as great as they were portrayed. We still had some things going on in our own home. First of all, we had our World War II vets coming home, those who did make it home, and what they saw and what they witnessed. And those things were, of course, damaging. World War II was also, I want to say this is one of the times where gas was really used. This is why this is a thing now in boot camps where they do the gas chamber essentially so that you can experience what that feels like and how to get out of it, how to hold your breath, whatever, is the actual reasoning behind it in our military pursuits. So As I said, stories are a snapshot of the time in which the author wrote them. So even though they tend to come off as entertainment sometimes, they tend to have a message underneath them, which is why so many people are afraid of the power of stories and books, which is why also we need to be reading them so that we can learn and understand and think critically. So that's what our channel is here about. And let me go ahead and introduce myself in case I did not. Hi, y'all. I am Miss Cannon, your online ELA teacher. And again, today we're going to dive into A Sound of Thunder. So if you're ready to get started, I'm ready to get reading. Let's go. Now, where The Most Dangerous Game was a ninth grade text, A Sound of Thunder is a 10th grade text. So we're just moving on up. I really didn't mean to make your ears bleed, but let's go forward and read the story. So as you can see here, we have our story. I will be making sure that the link will be in the description box for you so that you can read the story. You can actually read along with me now. If you click it and open it off to the side, you can read it with me, or you could just revisit it at the end because I'm sure it's going to be one that you love. I love it. It stands out. All right, so you ready? The Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury. The sign on the wall seemed to quaver under a film of sliding warm water. Eckels felt his eyelids blink over his stare, and the sign burned in this momentary darkness. Time Safari Inc. Safaris to any year in the past. You name the animal, we take you there. You shoot it. Warm phlegm gathered in Eckels' throat. He swallowed and pushed it down. The muscles around his mouth formed a smile as he put his hand slowly out upon the air, and in that hand waved a check for $10,000 to the man behind the desk. Does this safari guarantee I come back alive? We guarantee nothing, said the official, except the dinosaurs. He turned. This is Mr. Travis, your safari guide in the past. He'll tell you what and where to shoot. If he says no shooting, no shooting. If you disobey instructions, there's a stiff penalty of another $10,000 plus possible government action on your return. Eckels glanced across the vast office at a mass and tangle, a snaking and humming of wires and steel boxes, at an aura that flickered, now orange, now silver, now blue. There was a sound like a gigantic bonfire burning all of time, all the years and all the parchment calendars, all the hours piled high instead of flame. We're going to pause really quickly, okay? We're going to pause because you know that we don't continue reading without breaking down what we're reading. First of all, I want there to be an appreciation for Ray Bradbury's style of writing. As you can hear and see, he is very descriptive. Now, we learned what this term was in The Most Dangerous Game, and that is imagery. Imagery is a creative writing device, a literary device that uses words to paint a picture, much like an artist would. With the descriptive words, the ones that touch the senses, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting, and seeing. What happens then is that the reader becomes immersed in the world that the author is creating. So an example of this is to talk about the very small detail that Ray Bradbury pointed out about Eckels' throat. He had warm phlegm. First of all, ew, I didn't want to pay attention to that. But second of all, that very, very, very small detail tells you something about Eckels. In fact, this entire exchange right now is going to give you what we called foreshadowing so that we can know what's going to happen. First of all, warm phlegm is gathered in his throat. If he has to swallow against something, it's not just having saliva in your mouth like a normal day. It's like that moment when you feel like something might be choking you, possibly. And that's usually through nervousness, excitement, sometimes even anger, when you feel like a knot in your throat that you have to push down. And so the fact that we're paying attention to this thing in his throat, the phlegm, the disgustingness, and y'all, Mr. Bradbury is going to get a bit disgusting when we get further into the story. But the fact that we are paying attention to that is telling us that we need to be paying attention to Eckels' mindset, his state of mind. Okay. So we have this one part, right? So Eckels felt his eyelids blink, right? So he's so in tune with his own body that he could feel the blink. We blink and not even feel it, right? And then the sign burned in the momentary darkness. So it's like really standing out to him. Why could it possibly be doing that? Again, it might be nervousness, it might be excitement, like, oh my God, this is finally happening, like this type of thing. And so we know from the sign here that we're traveling to the past strictly to kill an animal, to go hunting, much like how we were doing in The Most Dangerous Game. Rainsford started off the story on his way to a hunt, and that's what we have here 30 years later inside of Ray Bradbury's story. We're going to a hunt. So that happens, right? And then it says the muscles around his mouth formed a smile. If you were a director and you were creating this film, you would be controlling what we see. And so as an author, Ray Bradbury is doing the same thing. So we go from the throat, right? We see the throat do that Adam's apple bob that a man's throat does, right? Then that camera comes up to his mouth. So we see muscles and they're forming a smile. So that doesn't sound easy. It doesn't sound easy, right? Because they have to form a smile, which means that there's effort being put in there, especially when we're talking about muscles. So we're zoomed in on his mouth and he's smiling. And then we pull back a little bit because then we see that his hand is giving a check, right? And it's slowly that he's doing this. So if there were any excitement, I think we'd be going a little bit faster. So slowly denotes that there is some kind of possible hesitation. So we have to follow these small details, these foreshadowing details that Ray Bradbury implants into the story. So then the very first dialogue we have, the very first dialogue we have is Eckels is asking for a guarantee that he's going to come back alive. This is a short story, y'all. It's 12 pages on this print, but it's a short story, which means that the author doesn't have time to waste with filler words or filler sentences. Everything means something. Everything means something for the story, right? So every line is to do work for the story. So the very first piece of dialogue we have is there a guarantee I'm coming back alive? And the very next piece of dialogue we have is, oh, we guarantee nothing. So we're starting to get a little bit of foreshadowing here. What can we guess? Well, there's the possibility that he will not come back alive. I also want you to pay attention to the check. $10,000 today, granted, it could still change somebody's life today. But almost 70 years ago, or 70 years ago, 72 years ago to be exact, 72 years ago, a $10,000 check is at least 8 times what it's worth now. So in fact, I think the number is a lot bigger and I could look it up and I probably will. I'll put the number here somewhere, okay? But that's worth a lot of money. So he's paying high five to over 6 figures to go hunting in an animal in the past. So we don't know which animal he's choosing just yet, right? So when he says nothing except the dinosaurs, now we do know what animal we're choosing. So we're going back to the prehistoric era. We're going back to a time where man did not exist at all. So there are no extinctions except us. Like we definitely did not exist, right? And so he's not going there by himself. He does have a guide, and the guide is going to be very strict about what to do, where to shoot, when to shoot, who to shoot, what to shoot, etc. Right? And then he's like, if you disobey, you're paying us another 6 figures worth of money. We don't care. And if the government come down your head, that's on you. Okay. So the other thing, like I said, we're talking about the imagery here, and now we're looking at the box or the thing that we are going to be using in order to time travel. And so he's given us the colors and he's giving us the description. So the light, the aura is flickering. So it's orange, blue, silver. These are like the colors of the stars, like novas and supernovas, and like the white heat, blue heat. So there's that. And then he also describes it as a gigantic bonfire burning all of time. So that's just beautiful. He's such a good writer. Who am I to judge? But obviously, this is very delicious. And let's continue. A touch of the hand, and this burning wood on an instant beautifully reversed itself. Eckels remembered the wording in the advertisements to the letter. Out of the chars and ashes, out of dust and coals, like golden salamanders, the old years, the green years might leap. Roses sweetened the air, white hair turned Irish black, wrinkles vanished, all, everything flying back to seed, flee death, rush down to their beginnings. Suns rise in western skies and set in glorious east. Moons eat themselves opposite to the custom, all and everything cupping one in another like Chinese boxes, rabbits into hats, all and everything returning to the fresh death, the seed death, the green death, to the time before the beginning. A touch of a hand might do it, the merest touch of a hand. Oh, so poetic. And so he's like, if you see the images that he chose to give, right? So you're seeing chars and ashes. So it really looks like a bonfire in his head. So you see dust and coals, and then the whipping of the color is like golden salamanders, the old years, the green years. So we're talking about dying in the reverse, like Benjamin Button style. We're going back in time, so much back in time that plants turn into seeds. The sun rises in the east here on the Western Hemisphere. So the sun usually rises in the east, but now it's setting in the east, rising in the west. Instead of the moon eating itself, so to speak, the half moon and all that stuff, it's going the opposite way. So everything is going opposite. And this was a beautiful way to say that. So everything is going opposite of how it's supposed to go. Let's pay attention to that. Everything is going opposite of how it's supposed to go. Unbelievable, Eccles breathed, the light of the machine on his thin face. A real time machine. He shook his head. Makes you think. If the election had gone badly yesterday, I might be here now running away from the results. Thank God Keith won. He'll make a fine president of the United States. Yes, said the man behind the desk. We're lucky. If Deutscher had gotten in, we'd have the worst kind of dictatorship. There's an anti-everything man for you. A militarist, antichrist, anti-human, anti-intellectual. People called us up, joking, but not joking. Said if Deutscher became president, they wanted to go live in 1492. Of course, it's not our business to conduct escapes, but to form safaris. Anyway, Keith's president now. All you got to worry about is shooting my dinosaur. Eccles finished it for him. A Tyrannosaurus Rex, the tyrant lizard, the most incredible monster in history. Sign this release. Anything happens to you, we're not responsible. Those dinosaurs are hungry. Eccles flashed angrily. Trying to scare me? Frankly, yes. We don't want anyone going who'll panic at the first shot. 6 safari leaders were killed last year, and a dozen hunters. We're here to give you the severest thrill a real hunter ever asked for, traveling you back 60 million years to bag the biggest game in all of time. Your personal check's still there. Tear it up. Mr. Eccles looked at the check. His fingers twitched. Good luck. said the man behind the desk. Mr. Travis, he's all yours. Let's pause. Oh man, are you seeing the foreshadowing? If you remember, foreshadowing is about the hints that are embedded within the story. Again, it's about casting this knowledge over us before we actually get there. Because I know the story, that stuff stands out to me, right? So I want to point out a couple of things because, as I said, there's nothing that an author wastes. Every word has to be on purpose. So we have a couple of things going on here, and I want to make sure that we pull those out. So let's back it up. So again, we talked about the guarantee. We said there's no guarantee. We talked about how beautiful it is to go back in time. And then Eckels is like in awe of it, which he should be, just considering how it's described. But here's what he said. And this part is really interesting because he talks about being able, financially able, to just leave if things don't go the way he wants it to. So he is of your 1% or whatever. He's up there to where money is no issue for him. His comfort is the issue. His thrills are the issue. So this is the type of man we're dealing with in Eckels. This is his characterization that is happening. So I want to talk about characterization really quickly because this is a great story in which to break down character, right? So there are two types of characterization. There's indirect characterization and then there's direct characterization. Indirect characterization is going to be through the things that people say, that the character says, right? So what a character says something about that character, the character's character. What a person does says something about their character. How they look or how they walk or how they move says something about their character. What they desire to have or to do or to be says something about their character. So those tend to be your indirect characterizations. The direct characterization is going to be things that are more in your face. He's big, he's tall, he's old. Those things are directly being conveyed through conversation. Somebody could say that about them. For instance, we just read that Deutscher would be the worst kind of dictator. That's very direct, right? There's no hemming and hawing or going around the bush for that. He's a militarist, he's an antichrist, he's anti-human. Those are direct characterizations that somebody has said about him. The indirect characterization is what we're receiving about Eckels, okay? And we also got some about the guy behind the desk, but the author doesn't even bother to give that guy a name. So he's only being used kind of as a prop to get us to this conversation that we have. He doesn't even get a name. Just the travel guide gets a name. He doesn't. So we know about Eckels. We know that there's this moment here where after, first of all, he talks about how he would just run away. Like money's no issue. Again, he'll just run away. So we have that we know about him. Obviously, he likes Keith, and indirectly, we can tell that Keith is the opposite of Deutscher. But then we have where the man behind the desk is telling Eckels what he's looking forward to, which is, we're not responsible for anything that happens to you. Like, we're literally going to go hunt a Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's not our fault if you die. You understand that, right? If you don't come back if you don't come back here, like, I mean, obviously we're gonna try to bring you back so that your body stays in time. But no, like, that's not our problem. And then Eckels gets angry because he doesn't like being told or treated as if he's a coward. This is one way to think about it, right? Because it said he flushed, which means he went red, like he just hothead, right? He went immediately angry. So indirectly, we're learning about Eckels is that he cannot control his emotions. So he is one of your very reactive type of people, right? So he can't control his emotions. He immediately goes red. He yells angrily, "You're trying to scare me," so he doesn't want to be thought of as a you. Um, and the other guy, like, he doesn't care. He's like, whatever, dude. Like, we lost people. We lost our leaders because of people like y'all. Like, so he's like, no, I don't even care. Throw a little hissy fit if you want to. There's your check. You can leave. And it says Eckels looks at the check. So here's your indirect characterization. And here is also some foreshadowing. His fingers twitched. Now, if you are steady, if you know what you want, what you're going to do, your fingers aren't twitching. Like you wouldn't be like, you know, hesitating is that. And remember, Ray Bradbury is our camera director. So he is focusing our attention. He's making us look where he wants us to look. So here we see the scene between Eckels and the man behind the desk. And then we see that Eckels looks at the check and we zoom in on his hand doing that little twitch thing. Now, if this was a movie, you already know something's up, something's up. All right. So now he's going to Mr. Travis. Okay. Let's continue. They moved silently across the room, taking their guns with them, toward the machine, toward the silver metal and the roaring light. First a day, then a night, and then a day, and then a night. And then it was day, night, day, night. A week, a month, a year, a decade. AD 2055, AD 2019, 1999, 1957, gone. The machine roared. They put on their oxygen helmets and tested the intercoms. All right, so we know our first year is 2055, so that's where we're starting, right? 2055, and it disappears. And then we're in all these future years that have not yet happened, because again, the story is written in 1952. And so just like that, time evaporates that easy. So now we need to use oxygen helmets because we're flying through time and we're testing the intercoms. So continuing. Eccles swayed on the padded seat, his face pale, his jaw stiff. He felt the trembling in his arms, and he looked down and found his hands tight on the new rifle. There were 4 other men in the machine: Travis, the safari leader, his assistant, L'Esperance, and 2 other hunters, Billings and Kramer. They sat looking at each other, and the years blazed around them. So again, Ray Bradbury is our camera director. He made us notice that Eccles was on a paddock seat, kind of like a crazy man, but his face was pale. If you're excited, you're flushed. You are pink and excited if you are a white male. And his jaw was stiff. So that means he was holding his teeth clenched so that his jaw was stiff. All right. So if you're excited, this is not what you're doing. Even if you are nervous excited, this is not how you would behave. Your eyes would be twinkling and you would be of a color. You would be nice and pink or excited, right? But his face is pale and his jaw is stiff. He is extremely, extremely nervous. He felt the trembling in his arms, not the trembling from the seat, not the trembling from the machine going in and out and in and out. And then he looks down, and we look down, and we see that his hands are tight on the new rifle. So when you are frightened, you grip on to the thing that you use as security, whatever that's going to be. And in this case, the gun is what's going to stand between him and the dinosaurs. So that's really important. So then he looks and there's 4 other men. And so we see these men. Let's get to what he just said. He said, "Can these guns get a dinosaur cold?" Eccles felt his mouth saying. So again, there's that detachment. That's what I meant to mention earlier. He seems to be detached from his own body. So it's like he's very, very, very aware of what he's doing instead of just doing it. I never think I felt my mouth saying as I'm talking. Like, I don't even think that right now. But here we're supposed to be paying attention to his mind state of how he is. And so he just asked, can these guns kill a dinosaur? I mean, they're rifles. Like, what are we going to? And so, Travis, if you hit him right, said Travis on the helmet radio, some dinosaurs have two brains, one in the head, one far down the spinal column. We stay away from those. That's stretching luck. Put your first two shots in the eyes, if you can. Blind them and go back into the brain. The machine howled. Time was a film run backward. Suns fled. 10 million moons fled after them. Think, said Eckels. Every hunter that ever lived would envy us today. This makes Africa seem like Illinois. So here we go again with a hunter who has gone to Africa to hunt those big games out there. And now he's saying it's just a little state in the US. So Africa is like a playground, so to speak, because, they didn't have Disneylands and theme parks like that back then. And so if you, again, pay attention to what he's saying the hunters would envy us. So now he feels self-important. He doesn't say that the hunters would love, other hunters would love to do this. Every hunter would, he's talking about, I'm something to be envied, which is really a characterization trait there. So he's not doing it for the love of the sport, such as, I guess, General Zaroff did in The Most Dangerous Game. He's doing it because he just wants to be the best. He just wants to have the best stuff. He just wants to do the things that other people can't do. And so let's continue. The machine slowed. Its scream fell to a murmur. The machine stopped. The sun stopped in the sky. The fog that had enveloped the machine blew away, and they were in an old time, a very old time indeed. 3 hunters and 2 safari heads with their blue metal guns across their knees. Christ wasn't born yet, said Travis. Moses hadn't gone to the mountains to talk to God. The pyramids are still in the earth, waiting to be cut up and put up. Remember that. Alexander, Caesar, Napoleon, Hitler, none of them exist. The man nodded. That, Mr. Travis pointed, is the jungle of 60,002,055 years before President Keith. He indicated a metal path that struck off into the green wilderness, over streaming swamp, among giant ferns and palms. And that, he said, is the path laid by Time Safari for your use. It floats 6 inches above the earth, don't touch so much as one blade of grass, flower, or tree. It's an anti-gravity metal. Its purpose is to keep you from touching this world of the past in any way. Stay on the path. Don't go off it. I repeat, don't go off for any reason. If you fall off, there's a penalty. And don't shoot any animal we don't okay. Let's pause here because I want to make sure we get this part. All right, so we're back in time, and he's very deliberate about the choices of people that he's sharing, right? So we're seeing that this world we know as we know it doesn't even exist. There is no Christ, so there's no Bible, there's no religion, there's none of that. Well, there's whoever's a religion, but there's none of that Christianity. There's not this world we know. There's no US, obviously, if that doesn't exist either. Moses is not on the mountaintop, so there's no 10 commandments. So in other words, there's no rules really happening, right? Then it has the pyramids are still in the earth. So we don't have a 7 wonder, 8 wonders of the world thing happening. There are no ancient peoples happening. So we're not where civilization even exists. No Alexander the Great, no Caesar, no Napoleon. So none of these dictatorial, authoritarian, honestly, in some ways, selfish people who thought about them and what they wanted. And of course, Hitler. Now, again, 1952, this story was written. So this is shortly following the World War II, in which Hitler was a prime leader of getting started. And so in writing and in speech making, people remember two things: your beginning and your end. The beginning, we're talking about Christ, religion, etc. In the end, we're talking about Hitler, the complete opposite of goodness, so to speak, right? And so Christ and Hitler are, the word is antithetical. We're not going to go over that term today. But they are complete opposites, right? So this is really a story of opposites here and what that actually means. So the fact that there's no Hitler and none of these other things, that's very important. And then we got our first rule, okay? We got our first rule. One, we learned up here how to shoot. So we have to shoot in the brain. We have to make sure like we kill the ones that only got one brain. So we're shooting in the brain. We're trying to make sure their eyes are blind so they don't see us, the humans that don't exist. Like, why are we there? So you want to make sure that happens. And then the main rule, and this is a very important rule, the path itself is 6 inches above the earth. So nothing's touching nothing. Nothing's touching nothing. So he's very, very, very adamant about don't touch anything. Don't touch a grass, not even grass. Grass is important. Don't touch that. Don't touch a tree. Don't infect this world with your presence at all. Okay. Don't go off the reason. Don't go off. Don't go off. Don't go off. And then also don't kill anything, because no, don't. Just don't do anything I don't tell you to do. All right. So let's get into why. Why? Asked Eckels. They sat in the ancient wilderness. Firebirds' cries blew on a wind, and the smell of tar, and old salt sea, moist grasses, and flowers the color of blood. We don't want to change the future. We don't belong here in the past. The government doesn't like us here. We have to pay big graft to keep our franchise. A time machine is finicky business. Not knowing it, we might kill an important animal, a small bird, a roach, a flower even, thus destroying an important link in a growing species. That's not clear, said Eckels. All right, Travis continued. Say we accidentally kill one mouse here. That means all the future families of this one particular mouse are destroyed, right? Right. And all the families of the families of the families of that one mouse. With a stamp of your foot, you annihilate first one, then a dozen, then 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000 possible mice. So they're dead, said Eckels. So what? So what? Travis snorted quietly. Well, what about the foxes that'll need those mice to survive? For want of 10 mice, a fox dies. For want of 10 foxes, a lion starves. For want of a lion, all manners of insects, vultures, infinite billions of life forms are thrown into chaos and destruction. Eventually, it all boils down to this. 59 million years later, a caveman, one of a dozen of the entire world, goes hunting wild boar or saber-toothed tiger for food. But you, my friend, have stepped on all the tigers in that region by stepping on one single mouse. So the caveman starves. And the caveman, please note, is not just any expendable man. No, he's an entire future nation. From his loins would have sprung 10 sons, from their loins 100 sons, and thus onward to a civilization. Destroy this one man, and you destroy a race, a people, an entire history of life. It's comparable to slaying some of Adam's grandchildren. The stump of your foot on one mouse could start an earthquake, the effects of which could shake our earth and destinies down through time to their very foundations. With the death of that one caveman, 1,000,000,000 others yet unborn are throttled in the womb. Perhaps Rome never rises on its 7 hills. Perhaps Europe is forever a dark forest, and only Asia waxes healthy and teeming. Step on a mouse, and you crush the pyramids. Step on a mouse, and you leave your prints like a Grand Canyon across eternity. Queen Elizabeth might never be born. Washington might never cross the Delaware, and there might never be a United States at all. So be careful. Stay on the path. Never step off. Let's back up because this is more talking. I don't want us to get totally lost. So we're going to back up just a little bit, all right? So if we take a look here at what is important, okay? And so Eckels asked the question, and I love that the author used him to do that so that he can explain this long, long monologue here that Travis has. But he's saying that every move we make has consequence. This is literally cause and effect. In the present, we don't think it matters. We don't think a little thing like turning our head to the left and sneezing, left, sneezing instead of turning our head right makes a difference. But what if we sneezed and somebody walks into it and we actually had the flu, didn't know it, they caught the flu, next thing you know, they die, blah, 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 or they spread it to somebody who's vulnerable. Everything we do matters. Everything we do affects everybody, even though we think we don't. It seems like it might be an over dramatization, but it's literally not, because if you follow the process, the line of thinking here, it makes absolute sense. One mouse really is 1,000, a billion, a million, right? Because they do have a lot of families. If you think about it, if your great, 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 great anything did not exist, was snuffed out by accident, by something else, instead of living, you would not be born. And that means too that everybody who came before you wouldn't have been born either. And what if, again, you were the line that brought through, and you could be, still could be, a line that brought through some great person who positively affected this earth. All the things change because of what we do, the choices we make. It makes it great what we are capable of, how small of a wave, how small of a ripple becomes a wave. That is really, really important. Okay, so let's continue. I see, said Eckels. Then it wouldn't pay for us to even touch the grass. Correct. Crushing certain plants could add up infinitesimally. A little error here would multiply in 60 million years, all out of proportion. Of course, maybe our theory is wrong. Maybe time can't be changed by us, or maybe it can be changed only in little subtle ways. A dead mouse here makes an insect imbalance there, a population disproportion later, a bad harvest further on, a depression, mass starvation, and finally a change in social temperament in far-flung countries. Something much more subtle like that. Perhaps only a soft breath, a whisper, a hair of pollen on the air, such a slight change that unless you look close, you wouldn't see it. Who knows? Who really can say he knows? We don't know. We're guessing. But until we do know for certain whether our messing around in time can make a big roar or a little rustle in history, we're being careful. This machine, this path, your clothing and bodies were sterilized, as you know, before the journey. We wear these oxygen helmets so we can't introduce our bacteria into an ancient atmosphere. How do we know which animals to shoot? They're marked with red paint, said Travis. Today, before our journey, we sent L'Esperance here, back with the machine. He came to this particular era and followed certain animals, studying them. Right, said L'Esperance. I tracked them through their entire existence, noting which of them lied. Right, said L'Esperance. I tracked them through their entire existence, noting which of them lives longest. Very few. How many times they mate? Not often. Life's short. When I find one that's going to die when a tree falls on him, or one that drowns in a tar pit, I note the exact hour, minute, and second. I shoot a paintball and it leaves a red patch on his side. We can't miss it. Then I correlate our arrival in the past so that we meet the monster not more than 2 minutes before he would have died anyway. This way, we kill only animals with no future that are never going to mate again. You see how careful we are? But if you came back this morning in time, said Eckels eagerly, you must have bumped into us, our safari. How did it turn out? Was it successful? Did all of us get through alive? Travis and L'Esperance gave each other a look. We're going to pause right here because, y'all, we are foreshadowing. We are laying so many clues in this here thing. Okay. So let's back up just a little bit, just a little bit, just a little bit. All right. So we already explained about the history and the time, and we talked about how everything builds upon each other. And he continues with that. And he gives us this this particular instant, this particular pathway that the changes might happen. It might be something completely subtle. It might be something that you would not have normally noticed if you weren't paying attention, right? So what we can conjecture, what we can predict, what we can assume is going to happen in the rest of the story is going to be either big or infinitesimally small. Infinitesimally, I love that word, by the way. It is such a delicious word. Look how tiny, I mean, look how large it is, but it means something so tiny that you can barely see it, right? So, like, an atom would be infinitesimal, like you can't really see it with your naked eye. So it would, that's what that word means. It's like crushing certain plants could just be so small, right? It seems like it'll be nothing. However, those little things multiply through the years. We're not talking about tomorrow. We're talking about 60 million years in the future. And again, when we gave the mouse example, you know, they're in a world that is the circle of life. Like it eats itself right now. So like a dinosaur eats another dinosaur, eats another dinosaur that ate a plant, like that type of thing. So if that dinosaur was going to eat this plant, but you crushed it because you went back in the past, and so that dinosaur didn't get it, you get what I'm saying? Like it just keeps going. So um again, the author is very, very, very particular in what he's saying. Nothing is thrown away. So it says here, and it wouldn't pay for us to even touch the grass, like just touch it, right? And then we are explained here that we are sterilized. Our path is sterilized, the machine is sterilized, bodies, blah, 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 is sterilized, right? Everything is sterilized. And again, so not even touching the grass. And then it says it could be so small of a change, like so small that unless you look close, you wouldn't see it. So we want to remember everything that Ray Bradbury is telling us, right? And so then he asks the questions for us. I love that he's using Eckels to be our voice in this case. So he's asking the questions for us. Which animals do you know how to shoot, right? And so he tells you that they're marked with red paint. So this is where the paradox, right? And again, paradox means that two things seem contradictory, but they are both true. So this is where the paradox happens of time travel, because we know that L'Esperance went back in time, but did he go back in time by himself? Like, did they exist in that time? Or like, did he go before they ever existed? And so that was like where I started to have questions, right? Because he comes and he studies him. He goes, he looks to see which one dies here. Like, and they said very specifically about a tree falling on him, right? Because if that animal had died and it's because a tree had fell on him, then it means that it was a natural occurrence. Nothing doesn't go the way it's supposed to go, right? If it's just a tree or if it's just a tar pit. But if like an animal was was killed by another animal, and you shot that animal instead of it being killed by the other animal, then you are changing things. You are doing that. So they're looking for the natural occurrence things, like drowning in a tar pit. That's like the perfect one to do because um, that body is gone. It goes into a tar pit, so nothing comes out of a tar pit except tar, like the smell and whatever. So it's that doesn't hurt anybody. Um, you know, so like you can shoot them and then they can fall in the tar pit. The only thing about that, I don't know, is because like then in the future when they do find this dinosaur, um, and then they excavate it and then they find bullets, like does that happen? I don't know. Um I don't know. What was this show we were watching? Oh, Umbrella Academy. Umbrella Academy has the time travel thing. And again, time travel gets really messy because it's you got to lay down some very, very strict rules. And so it gets messy immediately because then Eccles goes, well, if you came back, then you know what happened. So what happened? Like, are we gonna make it? Like, and this right here, here's our like, listen, again, if this was a movie, this is not gonna bode well. Travis and Lesperance looks at each other. What? What's that look about? I'm very, very curious. So, um, and he says like, that he correlates the past to get there so that the monster dies at this time and a date. And so it's just it gets sticky. That's why I don't like time travel. Time travel gets very sticky as far as a story plot because for me, that loop keeps going. It's like, when does that loop stop? Ever? And when did it begin? Like, anyway, so they give a look. And then here we go again with the word paradox, right? So he tries to sort it out, our author, because again, he's using Eckels to be our voice. He's using Eckels to ask the questions for us, right? And so here he goes. He says, well, y'all, I'm losing accents. I don't even know what accent I have. I took a break before reading and then I came back. I was like, ah, shoot. Well, whoever has an accent, these accents are horrendous. But I'm trying to make them stand out, but I don't know if I can keep doing that. So Lesperance looks at, so this is Lesperance talking. The latter means the last one or the latest one. So that would be a paradox, said the latter. Time doesn't permit that sort of a mess. A man meeting himself. When occasions threaten, time steps aside, like an airplane hitting the air pocket. You felt that machine jump just before we stopped? That was us passing ourselves on the way back to the future. We saw nothing. There's no way of telling if this expedition was a success, if we got our monster, or whether all of us, meaning you, Mr. Eccles, got out alive. See, like that would make me question because all of us means all of us. So what do you mean, you, Miss Eck? Like, what you like? Eccles forgets to ask a question because I would have been like, well, what you mean me? And so again, they try to explain the paradox that two things cannot be true at once, essentially. Like two people could not exist, timeline things and all that. And it said that it got out of the way, right? There was an air pocket, it jumped, it got out of the way, and that they didn't see anything. However, I'm suspecting they know something. Like they might not have seen anything, but I'm suspecting they know something. Because why would you give each other a look? Why would you just go, oh no, that don't happen? You look at each other like, that's sus. That's very sus. Like, why would you? I'm confused. But anyway, Eccles smiled palely. So again, he's pale, nervous. Cut that, said Travis sharply. Everyone on his feet. They were ready to leave the machine. The jungle was high, and the jungle was broad, and the jungle was the entire world forever and ever. Sounds like music and sounds like flying tents filled the sky, and those were pterodactyls soaring with cavernous gray wings, gigantic bats of delirium and night fever. Eccles, balanced on the path, aimed his rifle playfully. Stop that, said Travis. Don't even aim for fun, blast you. If your gun should go off. Eccles flushed. Where's our Tyrannosaurus? L'Esperance checked his wristwatch. Up ahead. We'll bisect his trail in 60 seconds. Look for the red paint and don't shoot till we give the word. Stay on the path. Stay on the path. All right, so real quick, we're just going to take this here. Again, I love Ray Bradbury. He just like, you could just see the expanse of the jungle, just the stretch of the jungle. It was high, it was broad, and it was the entire world forever, ever. And then you can hear the sounds because, again, we never seen pterodactyls, right? But again, in his imagery and his metaphors and his similes, sounds like music, sounds like flying tents. So, like, you know, the sound of like I'll just say tents, but you know the sound of them flapping in the wind, like just that flapping sound. And so that's what he imagines is the pterodactyl sound, right? And then sounds like music, you know, birds are music. So and of course Travis is like, okay, so let's back it up. So again, remember we're talking about indirect and direct characterization. So we already got this. You know, they're pretty direct in trying to intimidate Eckels. So we got that. So they, you know, they come off no nonsense and whatnot. But when he says that, I mean, when the author says that Eckels balanced on the narrow path, and balance means it's skinny, y'all. Because it didn't say he just stands on the narrow path or anything like that. It says balanced on the narrow path. So that means like he has to hold himself fairly steady. Like I don't think they can walk by each other, you know? But then it says he aimed his rifle playfully. So you just imagine like a little kid with gray hair, just like, like I'm gonna get the pterodactyls, you know, and they're like, no, because that's not part of the plan. Stop acting like a little child. Okay, so Eccles, remember he flushed before. So here it didn't say flushed angrily, but it could be. It could be he got angry for being talked to, being chastised like a little kid. But it could also be embarrassed. Because y'all know when people get embarrassed, and you can see it, their face turns red. So it just says Eccles flushed. So here, I kind of take it that he was embarrassed. And so he changes the subject right away. And he's like, where's our Tyrannosaurus? Like, just show me what I paid for, okay? And so Lesperance looks at his watch. And again, repetition is another device. Repetition is another device that authors use that is very, very, very useful to you in trying to figure out what is going to happen in the story or what's important about the story. And so when I say this, I'm talking about this particular part of repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Stay on the path. Stay on the path. That's there. And then it says somewhere up here, like only kill those things that we say. But again, they say stay on the path, like be on the path. Don't move, like just keep your butt on the path. Here again, stay on the path, never step off. Stay on the path, never step off. And it's just repeated over and over and over again in the story. And we're only on like page 5 or 6. Yeah, so we're on page 5 of this. And so they're telling him over and over and over again to stay on the path. And that leads me to think not only is staying on the path important, because duh, we know why we don't want to touch anything by accident. But again, because they looked at each other and because they tried to scare the bejesus out of this boy, this man, like try to be like, listen, you don't want to come, you don't want to come, you don't want to come, don't come. I'm really beginning to think They know something. They know something. But such is life. Let's move on.